What is up, everybody? Thank you for checking out my video. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. It's a full overview of my spring-powered Vsr-10. So basically, I've been rebuilding and trying different parts to get the perfect spring-powered Vsr-10. And I think I finally have something that I'm happy with, at least I am right this second. So before I change anything, I wanted to make this video, and it's going to be a full build overview showcasing all of the ins and outs and modifications on this Vsr-10. I would like to get some of the boring stuff out of the way first, so we're going to start with the optic. So I have a few different scope configurations for this, and it all depends on how I want it to look or what kind of game I'm playing. So this is my all-time favorite scope. It's a Bushnell Forge in terrain finish. I believe it's discontinued. I had to buy it secondhand, and it just looks amazing. I bought it for the color and the way it looks. Midwest Industries QD mount. And all of my optics have QD mounts because I like to be able to just quick disconnect and change it. The downside to this scope is it's kind of heavy, but I'll make that sacrifice just because it looks that good. So I have another scope setup that I can use. I can just flip the QD levers, take off the Bushnell, and I can put on this Trinity Force Legacy. And I believe this scope alone compared to that is about a pound less. If I'm playing at night, when I'm using night vision and thermal, I have this ATN 640 thermal scope that I can also just clip on here. And this is my night scope. Now, before we move on, while we're on the topic of weight, I would like to touch on that a little bit. That is very important to me when I'm building a rifle, is the overall weight, because again, when you're lugging around all day, ounces or pounds, and whenever you can save weight, that's great. So right now, this rifle fully kitted with all the fancy attachments, the bipod, the stock with its own upgrades and parts added to it. And then if you add in one of the heaviest suppressors that I have, it weighs about 10.5 pounds, which I don't think is too bad for a custom sniper rifle with a bunch of attachments on it. So let's say I ditch the suppressor. I take off the big Bushnell scope and run the Trinity Force Legacy, take off the bipod, and I can even take off this monopod here. Now in this configuration, it's a night and day difference. You can just tell how much lighter it is, and it weighs about 7.5 pounds. So just by taking off the bipod, removing the suppressor, swapping scope, and taking off this monopod that I never use, I saved about 3 pounds, and that is huge when you're carrying around something all day. Okay, so let's move on. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the chassis. The chassis, the stock, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But this is my chassis configuration for my ultimate spring-powered Vsr-10. Now there are so many additional extra and custom parts added to this, but the base is a Maple Leaf S2 stock. I believe it's made of injection molded polymer, so it's lightweight and strong. So starting from the front and going to the back, there are Picatinny rails on the front of this chassis. There's this vertical one, which I don't know what you would ever actually put on there, but it's there. There's also a pick rail on the bottom. I do have this FDE Magpul bipod. It's nice if you want to just prop your rifle up. It's got cant, it's got the folding legs. And then I have a LaRue tactical QD adapter for it, so I can just flip the lever and take it on and off. There are some QD sling points on the front, and on the sides there are 2 metal M-lock rails. If you ever have M-lock rails, I highly recommend making sure that they're metal, because if you try and clamp something down too tight and it's polymer or plastic, you will most likely crack it, and then your expensive attachment could break off the gun. So that was important to me, that these M-lock panels were metal. I have, now it seems like defeating the purpose to put a Picatinny rail on an M-lock, but depending on the attachment, it just works better. I have these little Picatinny rails. I use them for either my power bank mount or if I'm using like a D-ball for night games. And then on this side, I have this little attachment that holds my pressure pad for the D-ball. Moving back, there is this mock magazine. Now, I think that mock magazines are pretty lame for an airsoft rifle, but if it serves somewhat of a purpose, I'm all about it. And this one is a magazine holder. So it's a mock mag, but it holds spare Vsr-10 mags, which is really nice when you're reloading. You just take the mag out, and then you can take one out of there and put it in, and it's just a nice little feature. I do have some foam in the stock itself, and it just helps deaden a little bit of sound. Probably not a noticeable difference, but it's thought that counts. This little fluted piece here is a bolt stop. Now I'm left-handed, so almost every stock that you get, it'll be notched for a right-handed bolt handle. So, you know, when you rack it and you push the bolt forward and the handle clicks down, it stays in there. And I'll touch on that a little bit more, but it's really good for consistency. If you have the bolt locked in place when you fire the rifle, it won't move back at all. And that makes sure that the nozzle is sitting in the bucking at the exact same spot every shot. So because I'm left-handed, there was no way to lock the bolt. So technically it could move, and I don't really want that movement. So a while ago, I found this random part online. I think it's a charging handle for some type of 22 rifle. I don't know. I saw that it was fluted and it looked really cool. And I just had to drill 2 holes and bolt it to the stock. And now I just have it at the right spot. So when I push the bolt forward and lock it down, it sits against this fluted bolt stop and it just keeps my nozzle where it's supposed to be. So beneath the fluted bolt stop is a metal trigger guard. This chassis does not come with a metal trigger guard. It comes with one that's made of the same material as the stock, and it's all one piece with it. You don't need a metal trigger guard. It's one of those things that I've always seen over the years that companies make as an upgraded metal trigger guard, and I'm a sucker for upgrades. The chances of you falling, smashing through your plastic trigger guard and damaging your trigger, it's probably never going to happen. But I took I think it's from an AK or Real Steel Saiga 12. I found some trigger guard that looked like it would work. I modified it a little bit and I bolted it to the rifle. And now I have an upgraded trigger guard that I didn't really need. So moving back, we have an MDT Elite grip. I love vertical grips on modular sniper rifles. That's another feature about this chassis that I really like, is it takes any real steel grip. That's huge for me when buying a stock because you can just put on any grip that you want. Right by that, there is a rear sling point just like the front, and it did have it on both sides, but I actually took this one off and I put on this Magpul one. I run these things, I don't actually run like 2-point slings, I run sling points. So there's this style that you can just clip in here, and I just clip it onto my shoulder and the rifle can just hang there. And then I have this one, it's Magpul made for this specific adapter, and I think that this one is just a little easier to take on and off with gloves on. It's like a little clampy claw thing. So I have that sling point on this side and then the standard on that side. Moving on to the butt stock, the stock of the stock. This piece alone you can upgrade from its base, and so of course I did. It's a Luth MBA stock, and I added the adjustable cheek riser, butt plate, and then I even bought this, I think I showed it in the beginning, this useless, well, it's not useless, you just don't need it for airsoft, but this sweet little monopod. So, you know, I got this monopod I can flip down, I can turn these knobs, I can adjust the height of the cheek riser, the butt plate, looks cool, and yeah, so that's that. So the kitted out Vsr-10 chassis is cool and all, but let's set that aside and move on to the Vsr-10 itself, or the upper or the action, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So when you're building a Vsr-10 and you want good performance, good consistency, accuracy, all of these parts here are crucial to those things. And this is a VSR Ultimate one-piece receiver and outer barrel. It's made by someone named Airsoft Marshall or Masada on the Airsoft Sniper Forum. And in my opinion, it is one of the most important parts that you should get when you're building a spring-powered Vsr-10. It's not so important for HPA, it will help, but it's really important for a spring-powered Vsr-10. I can't stress that enough. So a one-piece receiver and outer barrel is exactly that. The receiver and outer barrel are one piece. There is no play. When you thread together I don't care how good the receiver and outer barrel are, if you thread them together, you can take it with your hands and you can like rock it, and there's just play. When you're upgrading your Vsr-10, there are so many components, pretty much all of them, that you want to eliminate the play in. So I guess I'll start at the front and work to the back again. Anytime I have an airsoft sniper rifle, I always make sure it's set up to run a suppressor. My favorite way to attach a suppressor to any of my airsoft guns is by using a silverback muzzle brake. These muzzle brakes thread onto anything that's 14mm negative. So as long as you have the 14mm negative adapter on your outer barrel, you can put one of these on. I just like the variety of suppressors that Silverback makes. So I have this aluminum one, it's on the longer side. Then I have the slightly longer carbon fiber version. I have a shorter aluminum one, and then I have an even shorter carbon fiber one. Oh, here's my little white petite charger. If you understood that reference or saw that picture before, shame on you. But moving along. Right here, I have this simple rail adapter. I use this for my selfie cam. You could use it for other attachments, but I use a GoPro as a selfie cam, and it's just nice because I can attach it at the end of the barrel to make some of the videos that I do. Then here in the middle, we have this whole configuration here with the TDC rail and the mag block. And another reason that I really like the Maple Leaf chassis is because of this section right here. So the mag block is what bolts to the VSR upper that attaches it at one point into the stock itself. But this one, Maple Leaf made this top rail here that you can purchase separately, and it's designed to bolt to the mag block by 4 screws. And with that rail, it has a TDC knob. TDC stands for top dead center, and it is an adjustment that adjusts your hop up on any airsoft gun or a Vsr-10. But TDC, top dead center, is when the pressure point on the hop arm is at the top dead center of it, pressing down. And for a Vsr-10, that's, I can say it's about almost any upgrade, but it's one of the most important ones that you should have. The old school Vsr-10s had some lever on the side and it would apply pressure unevenly. And going into 2025, you should have a TDC on your Vsr-10. I'll touch more on that when we get into the internals of this. And then I think last but not least in terms of the receiver is just the scope rail. Simple as that. They make different height ones, but this is the one that came with Masada's one piece. Works great, does its job, Picatinny. All of my scopes attached to it, and I'm good to go. So now I saved what I think is the best for last, and that is the internals. So let's start with the trigger. There are a lot of triggers out there for the Vsr-10, and the most important thing is that it is 90 degree. Make sure that you get a 90 degree trigger and piston for your Vsr-10. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but essentially you have an angle of the sear and the back of the piston, and 90 degree is just stronger. That's all you need to know. You can look into it a little more yourself, but you want a 90 degree trigger. Now I'm going to tell you about 3 triggers that I would recommend and why I chose the one that I did. The first one that I've used myself that I don't currently own anymore is a Springer trigger. They've been around for a while. I've never had any issues with the ones that I've owned, and overall it's just a solid trigger. The next trigger that I would recommend is a sodium flux trigger. Now this particular one that I'm holding right here is an earlier prototype, but I used it and this thing is awesome. There's been so much thought and design put into this thing, and the guy Matt who made them, I'll put all his info in the description, he is constantly trying to find ways to make it better. And he has newer models out now. Just check out his website. Just a quick overview. Essentially it uses magnets and roller bearings. It aids with having a smoother bolt pull. It's a 90 degree trigger. It has adjustable trigger pull. I did make a video on this when I got it, but since then he's only made it better. So I highly recommend checking out the sodium flux trigger. So last and certainly not least, and the trigger that I went with, is the bolt trig, specifically the version 2. Now of all the features out there that these different 90 degree Vsr-10 triggers have, there is one feature that made me choose the bolt trig V2, and I won't ever go back. And I need to put the rifle back together to show you why. Okay, got my Vsr-10 back together. So the main reason that I went with the bolt trig V2 is because of the QD spring guide stopper. Pull my stock out of the way here. Just like that, I can pull the entire bolt assembly out by pulling down a lever and dropping the spring guide stopper. Now there are a lot of Vsr-10 triggers that have the option to drop the spring guide stopper down, and there are ways that you can, reach it or whatever by like sticking a screwdriver somewhere or maybe even attaching something to it like I did. But the way that the bolt trig is and the tabs are on the side, I was able to attach this random piece of metal I found at a hardware store and make a little pull tab. Now I'm not sure if bolt trig even makes triggers anymore, so if you see one of these for sale online, I'd maybe try and get your hands on one. Now depending on what you're doing and where you play, having that feature might not be that necessary for you. But for me, simply just building the rifle, it was nice having that. And that's because every time I was making adjustments to the piston weight or the air brake, I was able to just drop that and pull the bolt out. When I go to different airsoft fields, depending on the chrono limits, I can pull the bolt out quickly and then I can change the spring. So while I have the bolt out here, we'll move on to what's inside of my cylinder. So this is an edgy cylinder. Damn, that was really on there. So all of these parts here are going to be edgy, with the exception of this speed cylinder head wrench. And Ed makes some of, if not the best parts for the Vsr-10 and other sniper rifles. So let me get this cylinder head off here. and we'll talk about that. So the cylinder head, stainless steel. It has 2 O-rings to assure that it has a seal. It has the venturi, supposed to help with airflow. There's another damper in there to help with sound, and then it also is designed to work with the edgy SAP piston, which is the piston that I use. SAP, I think it's for shock absorbing piston. I think the way this piston works is when it slaps into the cylinder head, it acts as a shock absorber, and it really helps deaden the sound by the way it, compresses on impact. But this piston, you can change the weights. You can pop off the cup seal here and adjust the air brake to whatever you want. I run my air brake kind of short. I used it to fine tune the sound and FPS output of my setup here. This piece, the spring, is actually not edgy. Edgy does make springs, but it's one of those things where wrap back springs, those are just the way to go. If you look on forums, you'll always read that wrap backs are good. And once I started using them, I never went back. They make all different kinds nowadays. 2, 2+, 3, 3+, Hulk. They even make little spacers that you can fine tune your FPS output with just the spring and those components. Last piece inside of here is the spring guide. There's not much to it. It does just that. It guides the spring. You can run other spring guides if you want, but this came with the edgy SAP kit, so they're all designed to work together and they're high quality, so I decided to keep it for now. And the last piece of the cylinder set is the cylinder itself. Again, it's edgy. It has a really cool spiral fluted design. And at the back, we have the enlarged left-handed fluted bolt handle and end cap. So moving on to the last portion of my Vsr-10 build, I think that it would be the inner barrel group, which involves the inner barrel, hop-up bucking, and hop-up chamber. For inner barrels, I also swear by edgy, specifically edgy stainless steel inner barrels. Now let me just give a quick shout to LaRue Armament. If you're looking for high-end edgy barrels or cylinder and piston sets like I showed you, you can get all of those components at VsrArmament.com. Make sure you check his site out. He has a lot to offer for Vsr-10 upgrades. So the inner barrel is what guides the BB out of the rifle to your target. So when you have an inner barrel, the only real things you need is it has to be straight, have a smooth surface finish, and be stabilized with barrel spacers. Other than that, as long as you have a hop-up bucking that pairs well with the window, none of the other shit matters. I'm guilty of buying barrels with other features. So that being said, let me tell you about the barrel that I have in this rifle. So in this rifle, I have an edgy stainless steel dual bore ported 6.01 390 millimeter inner barrel. A lot of specifications there that we're talking about. Brass is like a softer metal and it can, I feel, get gunked up easier. Stainless is like a harder metal, so in theory, if you look at the science aspect of it, I think you could essentially have less vibration. I'm not a scientist or expert on physics or anything, but if you have less vibration, that's good because you don't want the barrel to vibrate more when you have the BB going through it. It could just cause all kinds of inconsistency issues. So edgy, the way he laps his barrels with whatever process he uses, they have the most miraculous inner surface finish I have ever seen. Probably the best out there. Now, when you lap and polish the inner barrel surface, I feel like there's a point of diminishing returns where it's on such a microscopic level that you really have no more performance to gain. So you can have a barrel that doesn't have an inner surface finish as good as edgy's and it still shoot just as well. But I like the inner surface finish on edgy barrels because it means that I don't have to clean the barrel as often. Dirt can't stick to it, I guess. I'm not sure, but I have probably thousands of rounds through this gun, and every time I take it apart and I look through the barrel, it is like the same mirror finish. I cannot tell you when the last time was that I cleaned this inner barrel. It's literally been years. And until I start experiencing some issues where I feel like I should clean my barrel, I'm probably not gonna do it. Now there's a couple features that I went with on my inner barrel that I think are overrated, so let me explain. I went with a dual bore. So I'm pretty sure at the start of the barrel where the hop-up window is, it's 6.01. But then by the time it gets to the end of the barrel, it's 6.05. So it's got that dual bore, it like tapers up. I really don't think it makes a difference. People will argue it. Same thing with the barrel ports. I got a ported barrel. There are 3 rows of ports on an edgy ported barrel in a Y pattern. So you have a dual bore ported barrel. People will argue that it gives you like a smoother, flatter trajectory or some shit like that. I think it's bullshit. I think it's a myth. I am guilty of spending the money for those features. The theory of it, the concept of it sounds great, and spending more money to get that extra performance, trying to squeeze every last drop of performance out of your toy gun. But I think that people argue it because they don't want to accept that they spent the extra money to see little to nothing. Maybe it does work. I don't really notice the difference. I've never done any like scientific controlled testing, but those are the specs on my inner barrel. So one of the last things is going to be the hop-up chamber and bucking, and there's a lot to talk about with that. And I have the OG, triple OG Action Army hop-up chamber. I don't think there's a better chamber out there. Action Army made this chamber. Guys got their hands on it, and you just couldn't beat it. It's CNC machined. It gives you a perfect air seal without the need of Teflon tape, and it accepts AEG and VSR GBBR buckings. But that being said, the Action Army chamber is not perfect. There are things that you can do to improve it even more. That's when TDC adjustment knobs became a thing. With an external TDC, like this Maple Leaf rail that is designed for the Maple Leaf mag block, that's all part of this Maple Leaf chassis, you can just turn this knob whenever you need to. If you need to make slight adjustments on the go, you just adjust it and you're good to go. No racking it, Allen key carrying, mag taking out, half-an-ass adjustment. One of the last little mods that I want to mention for the Action Army hop-up chamber is getting it machined to take O-rings. Every time I build a Vsr-10 and I get an Action Army hop-up chamber for one of my own rifles, I take the chamber and I send it to Max before I even install it and have him machine it so it can take O-rings. Masada, also known as Airsoft Marshall, who makes this airsoft receiver, he started 3D printing hop-up arms that went into the Action Army chamber, and it had like the perfect tolerance, and it was a drop-in mod, and as long as you used it with the right bucking, it greatly improved your performance. But then as time went on, he started getting into like CNC metal, and now he has a CNC aluminum hop-up arm for the Action Army hop-up chamber, and that's what I have in here. So the bucking that I always ended up going back to after trying a bunch of different buckings is the Maple Leaf Autobot 2021 Winter Edition. So over the years of all the combinations that I tried, this is what just ended up working great for me. The best consistency, the best accuracy, the best overall performance for the internals of the gun was an edgy barrel with a Maple Leaf 2021 Autobot Action Army hop-up chamber with the Masada hop-up arm. I think it's just the bee's knees. At the end of the day, just get whatever is right for you that works well in your gun. So I'm sure that I'm forgetting some little things, but I'm pretty sure that just about covers all of the ins and outs of my custom spring-powered airsoft sniper rifle. I hope you enjoyed my video. Don't forget to check out A.R.M. if you'd like to build a high-end Vsr-10 just like this one. Let me know what you think in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you next time.